So, welcome back. We continue on page 164 where we left off. 164, that is in the original text, which I believe we were holding on Kikachu ba'oretz mitachas k'mei b'shamayim mal, which is the end of the fourth line. You can see it in the corresponding English text, and as we always mention, namely for the newcomers, easiest to follow the class on the original website, which is at tanyaonline.com. The advantage, namely, is there's a separate scroll bar for the text that you can move on with the class as you follow the text, as well that you have the ability to access all the previous classes literally a click away. So, for example, there's quite a few classes in this that we were privileged to give in this Perek Zayin itself. Also spares us the need to repeat in elaboration the message of the previous classes, because it's literally a click away. So we can move on with a class today, and for that matter, you have the opportunity to watch all the other classes or to follow with all the other classes in Shari Chedemona, this segment, which relatively recent. I say relatively because we had the merit to conclude the Likutei Amorim, the first part of Tanya, and which is 53 chapters. Shari Chedemona is 12, and also you can find the entire Likutei Amorim also on the site, which comes up in the same fashion. The text, you can follow along with the text, which that's pretty much the advantage of this website. And we did mention Shari Chedemona, 12 chapter segment, very extremely unique. Shar, the gateway into oneness and faith. We spoke about this in the beginning of the opening. When we began the Shari Chedemona, I believe it was prior to the first learning the first chapter, the unique presentation here of the Alter Rebbe. And as we said, we summed it up over the course of this learning. Shari Chedemona, you enter this gate of oneness and faith presented by the Alter Rebbe. You're not coming out in the same way you entered. We said this because it's good to repeat, because it's not just another piece of information; it's transformative information, truly. So in Perek Zayin, which is a follow-up to Perek Vav, which is pretty much a direct extension of Perek Daled. We did speak Perek Hey is unique on its own. We spoke about it, the whole setup of Perek Hey, even though there's an important contributing factor in the very beginning of Perek Hey, which Alter Rebbe establishes with a certain metaphor based on a pasuk, gives us clarity in this whole concept he's trying to present over here. So, but the flow is over here that there's a chesed of Hashem, there's a gvura. One is the extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one is the contraction. The contraction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Gvura, expresses itself in Malchus, which is the cap, which the whole, which produces time, space, anything which seems to be separate. Lashon Emem Gil Chalim, Emem is coals extinguished, doesn't carry the fire of Elokus, but it's because of the Malchus, which is the cover up over the Shem Havayik Hashem Umagin Hashem Elikim, it's Elikim Malchus Adnos. Again, not to go into the whole thing, it's really would take up too much time, and let's try to see how much we can move on forward. And but it's all the same Hashem, because Hashem, and that's the point. Hashem Hu Elikim, the conclusion of the Perek Vav, which is in the end of the day, it's one God, and therefore whatever you see in the end of the day, it's ultimately part of the unity and the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet there's the way you see the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to the investment of Hashem Elikim, which comes to expression through the Malchus Adnus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to that. Not prior to that, because if it was not prior to that doesn't exist, because we're talking to ourselves over here. We're learning of about a world, primarily the Yid, which is meant to recognize that. So we're south of Malchus, if you will. We're part of we're the production of Malchus, which creates space and time, Olam, and we're part of the fabric of Olam. But we have the ability to ponder and say, this is only a cap which created all that. There's the way that Hashem is formed, so by himself, And in that area is just in a total manifestation of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. From that perspective, a point of view, nothing really exists. But how can you say nothing exists? If there's the Malchus, no, but it's the Malchus, it's Hashem placing. It's not, there's no other energy which is contracting that great Gili of Shem Havai. This is Hashem himself. It's another component with Hashem. So we could sense the way things are prior to that cap of Malchus. We spoke about I use this example, but whenever I use it, I feel it's like a bit too petty. We're learning about this stuff of Achdus Hashem, learning information of Achdus Hashem, but it fits a little bit. Like you look at the traffic light. There's no green light. There's no red light. There's one light, and there's a cover up. It's color green, so you see green, but there's no intrinsic light in the green. It's something which covers up. It's a bright bulb. And the green is just a green glass, and this is what you see, and gives you the message that you can go. Obviously, it's a good thing, but you can understand that no, there's it's the light behind it, that bright bulb, which is not sending any limited message. Limited in the context, it's not green nor red, just a bright bulb. It's something covering up over it, which gives off a different type of shine, green or any other color, that you can appreciate even after you see the cover-up, that it's really what is beyond that cover-up. And so too, we could sense that oneness, the way it exists pre-Malchus, that really nothing really exists. And again, in brief, very brief, because we learned this in the past week or two, in 3 even, expansively, this idea of Yichudi, this is supreme oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We need to say, to appreciate the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the ways from Shem Havai, that nothing really exists. Everything is bottled b'metzias. And then the Alter Rebbe goes on. Then there's the Yichudi Tato. Again, very briefly, the Rebbe began this chapter, Perik Zayin. Void is Yichudi Tato. That when you look through the lenses or through the reality better of Malchus, of Adnos, that everything is already, there's exists in time and space. You're looking milmato l'maylo. That would be one of the expressions over here to appreciate the message of Yichud Atah, the inferior oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That you're looking reality, like in other words, post the cap of Malchus. There's Man, there's Mokim. But even there, you understand that Hashem Elikim, that every place where you're looking at, in the end of the day, there is inevitably the energy of Shem Havaya. So the Malchus and whatever Malchus produces, every part of it, every moment in time, every second, every millisecond, every moment in space is by definition imbued with this which is transcendent in time and space. And there is the absolute fusion between the two, and every part and particle of all of reality with this which is transcendent of the reality which we know, which is again from the perspective of Shem Havaya, and more so, it doesn't have its own. If you look at, like, for example, the shine of the glass, back to that example, the glass itself, when you look at the glass and you see that the shine is green, you realize that every part of that shine is really the shine of the bright light bulb behind it. So you see a green shine, you do. And that's what sends off, and you see it at night especially, you can tell that something is bright. In other words, the glass is a bright green glass. But as you look at it, you can really tell and say, no, there's no intrinsic light with that color green. It's the bulb behind. So within every shine over here, in other words, you're even focusing on the color over here. And the color, in this case, is the particular message. What the green light is supposed to express, you see and you can tell that every part of that shine is really coming from the bulb behind, which is a different approach. That's meaning Yichud Atah. Inferior, meaning to say your focus is already on Zman Mokim, on Eilam, in other words, the production of Malchus. The way Malchus creates the whole phenomenon of time and place, which that is the objective of Malchus, the cap of Malchus, with the energy of Gvura, produces a phenomenon which is contracting the Emes Hashem, and therefore, as such, It produces time, place, like we said, by Malchus Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech, which doesn't exist higher than Malchus. Shem, from the perspective of Shem Havaya, we spoke about this as well. Hoya Havaya is Hoya Haviviyah Ki'echad. Past, present, and in the future, it's all one. The phenomenon of time and place comes from Malchus. So the Yichudit Hatah, the inferior Yichud, is that you're focusing on Malchus. You're focusing on the Malchus and the production of Malchus. And you're part and parcel of it. And you're focusing on the time and the divisiveness of time. Every minute, every millisecond, every second, every millisecond, every hour, every day. This is all a production of Malchus. Doesn't exist prior to Malchus. And so too when it comes to place, every single Nakuda in Mokim is really imbued with this which transcends Mokim, which is Shem Havaya. Every single moment in time is really fused together with this which transcends time, which is again the idea of Yichudut Hatah, and we're going to see it in other words, the inferior Yichud, because you're focusing on the Malchus and the production of Malchus. As opposed to Yichudi Law, you're not even dignifying that because you're focusing straight on the Shem Havaya. And from the perspective of Shem Havaya, it's all one, meaning to say that you don't even have to, you're not even dealing with any reality of Zman and Mokum. And again, even the individual, which is part and parcel of the reality of Zman and Mokum, which is each one of us living and experiencing the whole phenomenon of Eilam Haza, which is really the core of Eilam, even more than the supreme Eilam is. Eilam is Melashon Helam V'Hester, as the Gemara says, conceals over the true reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we are learning this. We're talking about, we are south, so to say, as a reproduction of Malchus, but we can appreciate in our minds that sensation of Yichudei Ilah as well. Because if we focus in, even given this example, as an example we just mentioned before, no, we realize that what's real, which is Mahava Machayim Mekayim, is the Shem Havaya, and from that perspective it's infinite, and in the face of infinity nothing really exists, so our existence doesn't even seem real to us, because we know that Be'etzem, everything is truly Batel B'Metzias, everything doesn't exist in the face of Shem Havaya. That's when we're looking from the perspective of Shem Havaya. There was a famous expression, Mekubalim or Chaykrim in Torah, and those who analyzed, from the perspective of Torah, from the perspective of Emes, they even asked the question: Is the world a true reality or it's an illusion? Because we know from the perspective of Shem Havaya, everything is Batel B'Metzias, everything is completely annulled and non-existent in the face of Shem Hashem, the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we spoke and explained and expansively elaborated on this in the previous weeks. And they came to the conclusion that there's only one way to know that this is real, because the Torah says it's real. The Torah says, Bereshis bara likimas hashamayim v'sa'aretz. That's why we ought to know that this is all true and real, and it's not an illusion. Because even the fact that we see it, that it looks real, doesn't mean anything. Some person dreams something and it looks very real, and we could sweat him up, and sometimes frighten him, or things that a dream could be very traumatic, and it looks very real. But then the person wakes up and no, it wasn't real at all. So without the Torah telling us, the world could be an illusion. But if you look over here, if they were coming from wherever they were coming from, particularly when you learn this information, it's not that hard to appreciate. Because from the perspective of Shem Havaya, everything is Batel B'Metzias, it doesn't exist. So even when we are here sitting as productions of Shema, of Malchus, of Adnos, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of that cap, so to say, of Malchus, and again with the energy and the message of Gvura, which is about contraction, concealment, we could also appreciate perhaps everything is Batel B'Metzias, not really real, because from this perspective of Shem Havaya, everything is truly Batel B'Metzias. And again, I say the word Batel B'Metzias, these are terminologies we used and explained in the previous classes, again, just a click away, and we can appreciate it. That's the sensation of Yichudei Ilah, the supreme Yichud, that nothing exists in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The novelty of Yichudei Hatah is even I'm focusing on this reality, and the way things are from a certain perspective and point of view, as we live in Eilam Haza, that this seems the real, palpable, tangible time, place, yesterday, today, tomorrow, which from the perspective of Shem Elikim, it exists. Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech, Hashem Mimech, the whole phenomenon of time and place exists. So even if I'm focusing on Malchus and Adnos and its production, which already I'm looking already Milmato L'Mailo, meaning to say, literally translate, I'm looking from the perspective of the Mata, the way I see things, and trying to see on high. In other words, to focus on its energy. There I realize that even there, every moment, it's not either or it doesn't exist, or when it exists, just leave it as it is, without any godly message. Not only godly message, what we're supposed to do as created beings and entities, with a mandate of establishing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu an abode via the learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. I know I will do that. I learn Torah, Yid learns Torah, and he does mitzvahs, and this is part of why Hashem created the world. You know, because Melech B'lei Am, as we learned in the beginning of Perek Zayin, this very chapter, that Hashem wanted an Am, something which is not part of the inner circle, something which appears to be separate, and that's why they wish to put on that cap of Malchus, and in order to be a Melech al Am, a king over a nation, which by definition they're kaviyachal separate, because in this case it's not truly separate, but no question there is the Malchus, which is a godly energy, which established that separateness. And then I take the world, which was created through that cap of Malchus, and I bring it back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the purpose of creation. And that's granted under my learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and utilize everything for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, elevating, refining, sublimating the whole world, which was created by that cap of Malchus, back, so to say, to introduce the energy of God in that very production, granted. But we're talking about beyond that. We're talking about the sensation of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That this is what Yichud Tata is, that I could sense that even within every single place, every single moment in time, every single detail in time and in place, in the end of the day, it's a mokim and zman, place and time, which is infused, imbued by the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shem Havaya. Hence, every single moment in time, I find the achdus, that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what the Alter Rebbe continues, because this is the way it truly is. In heaven above, in the earth below, the world below, and just like in the heaven above, mamosh, that everything is that everything is place, means to say again this phenomenon of place, which was part of the production of Malchus, of Adnos, that shame, that name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that character of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which produces heaven and earth, which is again mocking the phenomenon of place. It's all completely annulled in the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaMislabish Bay, which invests in it, through the Hashem's midah of Malchus, HaMyuchedes Bay Yisbarich, which is truly united one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning to say, I could sense even within Malchus and the production of Malchus, the Alter Rebbe even adds the word, the bittul b'mitzias. In other words, that really, even I'm looking milmata l'maylo, and I'm acknowledging, or I'm living the reality of Zman Mokim. I know that it's truly not only batul, but batul b'mitzias, because the whole Malchus, meaning to say, there's a certain state of not, even when it is, because the whole Malchus is really part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem Elikim. So Malchus in all its production is really a state of not in the face of Shem Havaya. Even though Malchus is a reality by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's Hashem Elikim. The only thing is Midas Malchus is Baruch, Midas Atzimtzum Hester Lahastir Erin Sa Baruch Hu. And to understand and appreciate that whole cap of Malchus is only an expression of contraction and concealment of Hashem by Hashem. Very important, by Hashem. Remember we gave the example that someone goes into a room for 6 hours because they have an important exam the following day, and as such they need the seclusion. So they lock the door behind them and sit there 6 hours, and they don't feel any confinement, any, so to say, limit. No one any sense of limitation. Certainly no hysteria, like someone takes someone else and throws them into a room for 6 hours, and locks the door behind them. Even though on the surface, this is the same scenario playing out, one in a room for 6 hours and another one in a room for 6 hours. But there's no comparison. Because this one put themselves in that room for those 6 hours for a purpose and for a reason. There is a constant, for the entire 6 hours, there's a constant state of ease and tranquility, and beyond that, appreciation that I can seclude myself to invest myself in the studies for which I'm going to have the exam the following day. And that's the point. Hashem is the one who put on that cap. It's Hashem himself. And again, there was a purpose, there was an objective, to conceal the infinite light of God, in order that time and place should not be completely annulled from what they are as time and place, and namely for their purpose. Because if you wouldn't have the cap of Malchus, it would, without the cap of Malchus, it wouldn't exist not only in the face of Shem Havaya, but it wouldn't exist at all. Nor the Tachtenim. There would not be the phenomenon of time and place, which is the comprise of Eilam, which comes only through Malchus. It wouldn't even be here, again, not only from the perspective of perspective, but in reality, it would never come to be. It would never unfold. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts this cap on. He put the cap on. He established this concealment. He established this contraction in order that again, for Hashem's master plan to unfold and to become real and to be able to be executed through a world which does not on its own have the sensation of godliness and Hashem's master plan, and introduce that into Eilam, the emes Hashem la'Eilam. So it's Hashem's decision to put on that cap in order that we should be able to take a world which doesn't seem to be godly, or the godly message is not default, and because of this cap, which creates the whole phenomenon of divisiveness, which doesn't exist in Achdus Hashem. In the spirit of true oneness, divisiveness doesn't exist, but to take the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and make it obvious in a world which is divided time and place in any other type of divisiveness, to introduce the Achdus Hashem, the emes Hashem la'Eilam. So there was a message, there was rather an objective and goal, and that's the only reason why Hashem put it on. Which again, if he wouldn't put on that cap, it wouldn't exist. So then once Hashem did it for the reason that he did it, we can still navigate through that very reality and say, whoa, even if it's there, it's truly not there from a certain perspective and point of view. And even where I am dealing with it, I could always sense that every moment and every iota and the smallest detail, which is the production of Malchus, is in the end of the day infused with this which transcends Malchus, Hashem Elikim, the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which from that perspective, Malchus and everything that Malchus produces wouldn't really exist. So even now that it does exist, I feel I could sense that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The broader picture, that's the idea, for example, people appreciate, if they're only honest with themselves, the whole phenomenon of Hashgacha Pratis. Many Maimorim, the Frierdiker Rebbe has it, and he says, like, a person's conceited every second. The more honest a person is, and the more focused a person is, we could always appreciate that divine providence which exists, not only at times when I experience something which is metaphysical, which is like davening or something, I tune into something which is higher than the whole phenomenon of time and place, especially the Alter Rebbe writes in Kudetera, we mentioned a number of times that a Yid, a kosher Yid, when he focuses, he's bitter. The Alter Rebbe's Lashon is, he's bitter just because he senses the dynamics of Eilam, he senses the dynamics of time and place. He's bitter because he knows this is the cap over the purity, unadulterated purity of Shem Hashem. And I just rather be part of the inner working or the inner part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not interested in this. It's Lashon Alter Rebbe and Kudetera, just the fact that he finds himself in the acknowledging and experiencing time and place. He feels locked up and so bitter, will be D'mayis Shalish, that he wants, Lashon Alter Rebbe, pretty much verbatim, he wants to just be part of this which is real, the Shem Havaya, and what's going to happen to me is going to be Batal Mitzvahs, but I don't care, I just want to be part of the true reality. As Alter Rebbe writes famously in Perek, Yotes in is magnum opus, L'Kutei Amorim, Neid Hashem Nishmas Adam. It's like the fire, you ask the fire, where are you jumping, where are you going? And I want to just go back to my source, but when you go back to your source, you're not going to be able to exist as a structured, a light, as a flame. You're just going to be part of your source and not even going to be able to be identified at all. And the fire says, no, I'm not interested. I don't really care. I just want to be part of what's real to me. And that's the whole reason why really fire gravitates upwards, because the shadish of Eish, the source and root of fire, is on high, and it's just held down by the wick, by the match, whatever's holding it down, a piece of wood and so on. But in itself, it'd rather be consumed and subsumed in this which is real, and it doesn't matter to the fire that it's going to lose its particular individuality. And so too is the very nature of the Yid. Neid Hashem Nishmas Adam. That's why it's compared to a candle. So we could sense that Shem Havaya, even when we're dealing with Zman HaMakom. Again, as we mentioned, the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, feeling and sensing the divine providence on a constant basis. Because it's not only, again, we were speaking about the Amidah, the Shemoneh Esrei sometimes, the experience of davening when the person enters into the world of Shem Havaya, which that's the whole point of davening, that the person should reach and be able to sense. How long you can sense it, it's case by case, day by day, individual by individual, but in the end of the day, that's the point, to appreciate the Yichudei Ilah, especially when someone comes to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, to appreciate that, and at that time, even from the perspective of Allah Malacha, that is the mandate, or that's the objective and goal, and the part and parcel of what davening is really all about, as a terminology in Halacha, hispashtos hagashmis. Because you kind of leave, if for a few seconds, it's also a successful davening, that you're able to enter into the sensation of the Yichudei Ilah, the supreme oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And nothing exists with a total bittul. He mentioned the other day, the Baal Shem Tov, if you really had a successful davening, categorically you should make a gaimel every single time you daven, if you really davened. Because how'd you come back from that sensation? How'd you land again? We spoke about it in the past. But the chidush over here is, from this perspective, again, what he's saying over here is that even where you're not experiencing that Yichudei Ilah experience, but you're already involved in time and place, and not you're involved, just like you're reluctant to be. Perhaps you could be reluctant, but then you're not in a way that you're just closed into it, without a purpose, without an objective, without a goal. No, there is a very clear and distinctive objective and goal, and perhaps there is a greater goal in dealing with, living, and identifying Zman HaMakom, in other words, this which comprises Olam, perhaps even more, one way or another, than the experience of Shemoneh Esrei or davening, even though we need that to be able to be focused on our mandate. And therefore we have to, so to say, leave the domain in order to gain the energy and to re-energize and refocus and realign our focus to this which is essentially true, that when we come back into the area of time and place, we should be able to know what to do with it, because in the end of the day, this is our mandate. Hashem wants us to take the tachtein, which is really time and place, and to sublimate it and bring in, introduce, infuse the Yichud Kutshu Brichu Shchinte, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, within the tachtein, within the reality and dynamics of time and place. And that becomes the ultimate objective and goal. And back to the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, a person after davening, when he sees the godly reality in every experience in association with time and place, that's the chidush of this Yichudei Tata, or very much aligned and with the spirit of Yichudei Tata, that I see the divine providence within place and time throughout my entire day. And I focus on it, and I appreciate it, and I realize that it's not only the sensation of davening when I leave or I ignore somewhat Malchus and its production, and I experience something higher. No, but within even Malchus, when I have the Habata Milmata L'mayla, meaning to say that when I'm involved in time and place, I see every Nekuda, every Iota, every second, millisecond, and beyond is in essence one with the Shem Havaya, which is higher than Malchus, and the production of Malchus, and in essence, they're really truly one, that they're truly fused together, So I find the godly message within Zman, within Mokim, knowing that in essence there is the true Yichud, even Tata, even from the perspective of Zman and Mokim, time and place. And I work along with that. And that gives me the enthusiasm to do what I have to do with my mandate, which Hashem sent me to this world to refine and elevate this very Tachtenim and make it a dira for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Damasol for Hashem. I'm going to continue another bit. V'hinei b'mashir nizboyer, this which we, based on this which we explained, Yuvon, will be understood, Masher Kosov, Ani Hashem le'shalisi. So the pasuk says, I have not changed, says Hashem. So there's again the simple meaning that Hashem says, Ani Hashem le'shinisi v'atem b'nei Yaakov le'chilisi, I'm always together with you and I never obliterated you. And with all that you've gone through, you're always, come out in the end with full existence and many times triumph. In other words, Hashem established and chose us as a nation over 3,300 years ago, and we're still around. We were never completely obliterated. That's basically the message of the pasuk. But there's no change in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In this context, that Hashem could establish that cap of Malchus, and it could establish all this production which Malchus produces. And the Malchus, even the Malchus of HaKadosh, it's Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but from the perspective of Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's time, there's place, there's Melech, Molech, Himlech, past, present, future, here and there and so on, which is again the phenomenon of Malkim. But Hashem says, no, Ani Hashem L'Shanis. If you look at from the emes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there are no changes. That there's no change in the bigger picture as well, Hashem pre-creation and post-creation, meaning to say there's just like the way Hashem was before creation, He's the same Shem Havaya after Hashem created the world. As we spoke about this as well in the famous chapter of the 33 in Likutei Amarim, it's a click away. It's worthwhile to enter into that message there, which is synonymous with this which we're learning over here. It's not that Hashem created before Hashem created the world. He was for himself, by himself. There was no entity of creation. And then when Hashem created the world, there's two entities. There's God and there's the world. He's in control. No one else is in control. He created, and he continues to create it. Hashem revitalizes creation. Again, this is part of the message of Shayach B'Mona. Every single moment, granted, so he's fully in charge, but there's another entity. Don't say it was exactly the same before Hashem created the world. Before Hashem created the world, there was no world, and now there is an Eilam. Comes the pasuk and says, no, Ani Hashem le'shanisi. There's no two realities, me and my world, and therefore because of my world, because I created the world, so there's some little impact. There shouldn't be an impact. Look at everything we do impacts us. Especially something so sophisticated. If creating a world apparently would impact the creator even subtly. A person builds even his 50th building, so he's already used to it. He's cool already. He builds buildings, he sells them, and everything is good. And then he's doing his 50th project. Doesn't make an impact on him. The time and the months when this is all happening, especially when the building is going up and it's being sold and so on, it makes an impact in every part of him or her. Because when you get involved in something, it impacts you. So apparently Hashem created the world. It's another entity. Again, not Chas v'Shalom a separate entity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's a whole, it's a sophisticated world, more than just a sophisticated project. So one would say there's a change before Hashem created the world and Hashem after created the world. It's not like he's tired or he sleeps less because now I got to deal with a new reality. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just the mere fact. There's the way they to prior to creation and the way after the way he's after creation. That before he was formed, wasn't anything in existence. So Hashem was there just by himself, and now no, Hashem. There's Hashem and His world, and it refers to all worlds, but even focusing on Elam Hazeh. There is Hashem, and then there's the Elam. So the pasuk says, no, Ani Hashem le'shanisi. There is no change. It's exactly Hashem before He created the world. Kach levad Hashem nibra. It's exactly the same way after He created the world. Because from the perspective of Shem Havaya, the world doesn't really exist. As we gave the example, when the master decides to teach the pupil which is really right now introduced into this whole phenomenon of scholarship and learning and studying and the interest and the coming forth to appreciate the scholarly knowledge of the master, and the master has to condense his depth. As we spoke about this mashal, not to take much time, he has to condense his depth, because if you'd start just divulging everything what he knows, the student would not begin to know what's going on. So he has to condense it and to make sure that everything he's going to say, the child will understand. And many times he has to put it into a story and a metaphor and so on. But the moment when, so one is going to say, yeah, there's the master before he got involved in the student, and there's the master after he gets involved in the student and teaching. So he's doing something else so different than his own indulging in his learning, and therefore perhaps he changed, and therefore his scholarship changed, and everything that he knew till now has been alterated. No, not at all. Every moment when he even says the story or the metaphor, he already sees the message. He sees not already, he sees the message. As he's condensing the information, the message with all its potency and depth and breadth is right there as he's saying the story to the child. So when Hashem created the world, it's the malchus that Hashem, that cap which Hashem is putting on, which is a character of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again the Hashem's contracting His great light in order to produce this trickling light, which would create a world, which is the cap of Malchus, Adnos, with the energy of Gvura, similar to this example of someone contracting this scholarly goyim. We use always the scholarship of Torah, just as an example. It works with any scholarship, lahavdil. But it's never compromised to say, oh, now he really changed. There's nothing about him changed. Every concept that he knew until then, that he decided to deal with another party and contract his knowledge in order to feed, to teaspoon it to the other party, every part of that knowledge is exactly the same, even as he's in the moment when he is transmitting it to the pupil, to the recipient. He didn't lose for one moment the depth and breadth of every piece of that knowledge that he's right now contracting. So when Hashem contracted His great light in order to create Olam, which is again the phenomenon of the cap of Malchus, did it impact HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We say it every single day in davening. Atu kaidim shnivra olam, atu lacha shnivra olam. And for that matter, it's all in all versions. We say, Hashem, you're the same before you created the world, and even after you created the world, it's the same you, exactly the same you. There's no Olam and there's no you and the world. It continues to be you, the way you decided that you're going to express yourself via being a creator. That you decided you're going to put on the cap of Malchus. And as such, Bereshis bar Elikim, right? Elikim, Bereshis bar Elikim, as Hashemayim V'Sa'aretz, as it says Shem Havayim. It's the Elikim, it's the cap which produces, in other words, the energy is Shem Havayim. B'yei Masei Hashem Elikim Shemayim V'Aretz. But what produces Shemayim V'Aretz, that we're able to see Shemayim V'Aretz, it's Mitzat Shem Elikim, but it's all you. So if it's all you, there is nothing new came into being. There's no change, nor in Hashem's essence, and nor in Hashem's knowledge. We'll stop over here, and we'll be able to appreciate this idea in Hashem's knowledge, to say, well, before he didn't know about Olam, now he does. Something maybe subtly has been reformed over here. No, there's no change. Now, Rebbe introduces the famous Rambam, which we're going to go into it, Bez Hashem, the next time around. Bez Hashem Yisbarech. So, when we say B'lishum Shini Batzmusei, because there is no change in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even after He created the world, it's the same Hashem Hu Elikim. Let's just conclude with that example. When the individual put themselves in the room in order to study for that exam which they're going to have the next day, it's not like they were a total different person there when I'm out of the room and here when I'm in the room, to say that there was freedom prior and post, but in the time when I was in the room, there was a certain state of confinement and this, as such, discomfort, and I can't wait to get out. Well, people like to, to drop the tension of the weight and the tension of the exam, like any exam. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about their individuality or their mindset or their core, their essence. It's the same person, exactly the same person. For that matter, there's even appreciation. A person, we know there's even pleasure in scholarly work and scholarly investment. So it's just one person, the time when they're doing this and the time when they're doing that and the time when they decided that they're going to go into the room for 6 hours because they want to study and to get a good mark the next day. It's all about them, so there's no real change. It's one personality expressing itself in different ways. It's not two personalities, which gives us a little bit to get a taste of what he's saying, or the sensation in this message, or the appreciation in this message, rather, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to put on that cap, which produces manamakim. But even when it is, from a certain perspective, it's really not, because Hu Shmei Echad. In other words, Hashem and His world are essentially one. This is the message of Hashem Hu Elikim. Hashem Hu Elikim. You see, Bereshis Bar Elikim. No, it's Hashem Hu Elikim. Eined Milvadei. Even when it exists, it's really about Hashem. As such, Ani Hashem Leishanisi. There's no change. Prior to creation and post-creation, it's exactly the same. Have a wonderful night.